So if you who don't know me, I'm Doris Sung, and I'm actually on sabbatical this year. I'm not really supposed to be here, but now that I've been given the microphone, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Minsuk Cho. We go back quite a bit to graduate school, and I was thinking about how to introduce him. So we've had a friendship for many, many years. And when we were in graduate school, and you're not going to remember this, we went to Columbia. There were only 5 Koreans there at the time. And like any good Asian group, we thought, oh, we're just going to make, just for fun, this kind of Korean club. And in a very Korean way, we decided to set our officers in our 5-person club by age and by by position. And so, unfortunately for Min, he was the youngest of our group, and therefore only took the status of a member. I was secretary. But anyway, we never did any activities besides eating or drinking like other good Koreans. But in the meantime, after graduate school, we obviously parted our ways. Min continued working for a few architects in New York and then in Europe before he landed back in Korea. And at that point, he opened his practice and started working over the years. And during those years, actually saw a lot of changes, not only in Korea, in Seoul, but around the world. And so what you'll see is that his practice and his work starts to embody a lot of those different facets and really starts to expose the evolution of change. So keep in mind, Korea during that time went from a country that was developing to a very wealthy country, right? The drastic change in the last 10, 20, almost 30 years even. The changes from military to back to almost military, right? Now that we're considering this North Korea, South Korea problem, it has always been there at some level, whether it's nostalgic, political, and potentially even military. There's issues of commerce that have changed dramatically. So in areas where even his office is in Itaewon, Seoul, it used to be originally a base that was started around the U.S. base many years ago, and maybe you can correct that too, and was commerce, and then through the years became a center of a lot of black market, before it became more recently a very hipster, and very expensive shopping area. And so during that time, his office is now located originally probably at the edge of it, but now more towards the center of it. And so you see a lot of these changes in Seoul and in Korea, but simultaneously around the world. So during that time, the internet, the issues of trade, different international presidents and leadership, to technology and development now to anything like Elon Musk and the internet and softwares happened internationally. So during this period of time, Min had this practice and was able to not only survive, but thrive and really develop some really interesting projects. So I think today it'll be interesting seeing his work and to hopefully hold your questions till the end. So with that, I introduce Minsuk Cho.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for a kind intro, Doris. Always nice to meet you. In fact, this is my second visit to this school. I think it was a Chinyung's second year, so that falls on maybe 10 years ago. This when I had maybe a 5-year practice. He kindly invited me. I think they gave me even a position. It's like this nice Vitra Pantone chair sitting on top of this wooden block, some sort of a professorship. So, yeah, it's our office now. It's going to pass our 15 years, so it's actually 3 times more work we have done, and we've been quite consistently producing work, maybe 10 or 12 a year. Design, maybe out of those, maybe 3 or 4 projects get to be built. A lot of lost competitions and stupid decisions and so on. And we've been kind of responding a series of distinct geographic, social, political conditions that are constantly in flux, consequently, each project has been developed from ideas extracted from their own highly specific conditions. Each comes with a set of multiple variations that include scale and speed and economy, namely small to big, large, and then slow to fast, and cheap to very expensive. That comes in very different combinations often, although the default is the bigger, faster, cheaper kind of situation. That are holy trinity, unholy maybe. And there are seemingly, so those are absent of apparent order. And in response to this ubiquitous complexity of urban development, which in fact has been recently, since maybe 2008, that we all went through, turned stagnant. We kind of pursue design method. We call it investigating the idea of systemic heterogeneity, sort of a oxymoron kind of word, grounded in a constant curiosity of the diverse and complex situations in which they operate, while embracing the obscure and unseen as an opportunity. And you're just looking at our project that we have done various scales, and it's all mostly in Korea. We're quite happy being there. Not that we really embrace this local versus this global thing, but this is, I guess, this exception of this New York that we did, small, very temporal sort of attempt. There's a lot of Where's Waldo images, but there's somewhere in our projects were there. I just kind of collected just to show what type of different context that we've been operating. Often I kind of use an analogy of like you're using, you have to kind of invent the entire puzzle set of over nothingness, or sometimes you have to have this kind of somebody points a gun at you and like a hold it situation that you can't really have any other choice than really have this obey this last piece of puzzle and so on. So yes, I'll just by the way, at the bottom, the corner, 09 means the design year 2009. D will be the fourth project of that year. That's how we've been kind of numbering this one. We finished this house as a sort of museum last year. Then this is more current one, which kind of excites me because as you can see, this building looks very Corbusian, and this is someone who worked under Le Corbusier in the mid-50s. He was part of the Chandigarh project. He came back, and my father was a second employee of him, actually. He's an architect, still sort of dreams. He's almost 90, and it's a French embassy, and it's first time we're actually doing a restoration project also. And the black building behind, the one vertical, one horizontal, is actually their overhaul. So that's one of the things. And this one, if I have time, I'll tell you, maybe, probably not, but this is DMZ sort of project that is completely various self-initiated project together with many artists and architects at the time. Yes, Francis Alice, you probably heard of. It's not he's only talking about, I think I agree with the same thing happens in the architecture world, that we've been very good at, I think, avoiding to turn into a robot, because if you're known for something, it's quickly, I mean, initially we flirted with and become quite successful as a sort of a developer architect, because we kind of embrace all these realities, and there's other, we had, of course, be able to somehow pursue our agenda through that. This is a more recent project that we just completed. It's a dormitory for 600 students in Daejeon. This one is in the same city as Daejeon. It's also, Daejeon is a quite collegial city, and it's like almost MIT of Korea. There's a neuroscience professor who is quite well-known public figure in Korea, and who happened to be a good friend of mine. And we designed a house that is for him and his wife and 3 daughters. But then this house come with also 20,000 books. So the slope roof is something that is a contextual obligation that every building has to do, this 1 to 4 slope at least, something like that. And the site is actually quite central at this sort of what would be kind of closest to maybe American suburban sort of residential development, because as you probably know, most urban population in Korea, 60% of them living in those high-rise apartment, what we call apart republic. We'll deal with that later. So this is quite exceptional opportunity. I mean, we've done several like single houses also. Only the people that I like, we like, not the rich people, I tell you. Somehow, I mean, we don't mind that, but And then this house is actually a worse site they choose, the last one they move in, so it's facing south, has this other neighbors completely sort of surround, and they only have this exposure on both sides. And idea of this three family, we kind of come up with a very simple 2 volumes, and the first volume has a master zone, and then a kind of the double height library. His study is sitting on it, and the second volume on the ground level has a living and dining area. Also, the mezzanine has this library, and then on top it has this 3 daughters zone, and then it becomes almost like a promenade sort of a situation vertically. Sort of books are tying together. It's almost finished. So it's a last week picture, and that's the living room. And now before people move in, there are so many books. So that people he sort of hired who would be the future librarian from his university, and doing their Dewey Decimal sort of organization. Another volume is also his own. I mean, he's also he's also soon starting like almost Carl Sagan Cosmos, like this TV series with educational program and so on. So this is not just a house, but it's quite public sort of a building in a way. And then as you, this is small. This is where finally second level we can kind of bring some southern light. So he has a little patio outside. Again, this is the last week. It's organizing. And then the third level, this is a moment when the mezzanine of second level, which is third level, look down at this study, and then another level down, which is the living room. And there will be a nice tree, one tree in the middle, small courtyard. And then that third level connects to the daughters' zone, so that daughters have their own sort of a little bar and identical 3 rooms. They accepted this quite Spartan setting with some woods. There's their shower, skylight. And then we managed to put some attic there, which doesn't count as a floor, because this area only you're allowed to have 2-story building. And then the roof becomes where it gets the best view. It gets the sort of nice also hangout deck area. Okay, so and then so these are sort of a small challenges, and then this will be a sort of totally different scale. We completed this building. Probably the architecture genre is most blockbuster, or sort of in the most vulgar way. It's a shopping mall, and that relates to, it's about 550 meters long. It has this kind of also peak roof there, but that's with a different agenda. Maybe there's some shared common things also. It's actually goes back to my last job that I worked. I had a boss before becoming my own boss. There's a company called OMA in Rotterdam. 20 years ago, it was my last project, and it was a competition of this Songdo, which is then somehow considered to be the world's largest reclaimed area, about 35 square kilometers of area, which was just mud in this at that situation. Small polders start to get built. It was actually LA from it was Gruen, and then the Nihon Seikei from Tokyo. 3 firms competed, and then we won actually. So I left it because I had to do a little practice in New York first before I come back. It was like a small apartment renovation. Anyway, at a certain point, I saw like a National Geography magazine, and then I saw the satellite picture of Korea, and then I was kind of shocked to see they actually drew that's the road that we did, and it's now they're kind of scheduled to pack 1 million people there, and about 100,000 people moved there. So this is old part of Incheon, and then the other side is a whole new part. It's compared to the Brasilia of 21st century, but then you have KPF designed the entire first batch. What you're looking at is more or less designed by not Niemeyer, but the KPF came with a sort of investor in America just after IMF crisis, which kind of halted this project. So, as in anything of that scale, it kind of comes in a very sort of a deviated way. However, I was so shocked that very original idea of this first stop coming from into this territory, this new territory, subway stop, where we envision as a sort of connective tissue shopping area, as a way to reach this university international a campus They had Utah University and also Yonsei Global Campus and also New York State University and so on. So it's actually also quite shocked that it wasn't completely the the whole market runs wild and free, but there's some element of good control in there. So this was also interesting site because it was kind of casualty of 2008 global crisis, where the Libeskind has designed this big 540-meter long 4-block site as a shopping mall, and then they crashed, and the client got bankrupt. So you kind of left with this 3 floors deep colossal underground space, mainly for parking lot, and it was a decaying for like 6 years. So our client took it and become a second investor and asked us to design pretty much from using almost, it's sort of ironic because we designed this Tabirasa city, but then what we were given to us was a ruin of with a history almost. And the idea was, this was also an interesting way to explore this whole sustainable sort of try to give alternative to these two polarized speed. My personal part, I never have driven a car before in my life. Actually, I have a license for 30 years, and I kind of live it that way. I came back 15 years ago, and I live everything within walking distance. That has to be my 3 years in bicycle guy at Rotterdam or living in New York, but so, I still like LA. I mean, Uber helps, but but I think any place that feel people doesn't have to drive a handicap, I think that's problematic in my opinion. So the idea was that we call this a PUV friendly city, personal utility vehicles like electric. That word didn't really catch on much, but wheelchairs or electric scooters and so on, because it's quite long and they want have people to occupy and visit often. So it works almost like becoming an infrastructure project. So this again, it has more than 200 shops and restaurants and so on, but we kind of decided let them do their own Starbucks facade and H&M, Zara and all that, and then we just give these. It become quite popular of the young mothers with baby strollers and so on. It goes down and it goes up and down to the basement, and we kind of create this loop. So and then they start to put like a little soccer field for children's, and then it become we kind of envision this as almost like a high line before other building moves in, so that. This was the opening when it's completely carpet bombed by Pikachus, more than the number of humans. And then also Incheon City was very ecstatic because somebody saved this sort of land and they allow us all these exceptional things. For example, putting all the obligatory public art on the roof so that they kind of recognize as a public ground. And then we kind of suggested that, hey, you're going to have to build this little higher buildings around it. So later you can kind of hook it up and it will be mutually beneficial. And actually there's a first building will be being designed that way. We didn't design it. We had that opportunity, but we let other people do it. And so that's sort of the idea. This one is also, we're quite having exciting time because Seoul now kind of with the good mayor, he's going to win probably third term, but a lot of good public spaces happening. And this is an area, a little entity in the middle of Hangang. Hangang, as you probably heard of, Hangang, south and north. North is about 625-year-old city. South is about 50 years old, a little younger than me. And there are 27 bridges, 1 kilometer long. The distance is about Manhattan to New Jersey. It's not like a Thames or Seine River. It's not really a romantic river. But although when I was little, we went to this river beach. I remember that, but it comes with a flood and other natural disasters. To control that, there was a lot of natural features that have been sacrificed, and one of these thing was a Bamsan, what we call Chestnut Island, was actually was a zomia of this outcast living there, making ships during this old kingdom area, and it was completely exploded. So they had to evacuate in late 60s to create rubbles to create a polder along the river. And then somehow strangely, this because of the river curvature and the sedimentation process, it kind of grew back to bigger than where it was. And then, so at a certain point, maybe 15 years ago, Seoul City decided, because it started to also attract migrating birds. You probably heard, Korea attracts somehow 60% of the migrating birds that on their way all the way to Svalbard, Norway. And so that it becomes a Ramses site. So the competition was actually invited sort of few architects from Japan, America, and us. It was actually they wanted to have this bird watching sort of a pavilion, some sort of an iconic thing. And this is what you're looking at, is still growing thing. And for me, I thought it was a really good lesson for humans. You know, humans make city for themselves, but then this whole other thing is happening. Nature, for example, or other ecology. So then we thought maybe instead of creating this hard edge that was already there, and then also this site is happened to have this reservoir that is part of this old fire station, which is burns a lot of carbon fuel. So soon it will become like what would be maybe the Tate of Seoul. So that's kind of on the way. So this is kind of a preparation for that as well. So what we did was actually taking that sort of polder and the reservoir, we kind of keep it open, and then we create some kind of what we call satellite pamsums. So because the water comes from the main pamsum direction, and we kind of figure with this sort of experts that it will probably have similar kind of ecology can be created there. So that we have this small piece of land that could maybe grow, and then we have this kind of a zigzagging sort of a passage that keeps its kind of a allowed distance of 250 meters from not to scare away these birds. So, so that's sort of the idea that it's kind of like a big precast concrete, and this pontoon structure goes up and down 10 meters of fluctuation, and that this will be made from down south, carried by a barge boat, and hopefully it's a simple project. So it's kind of a way to bring, we cannot go there. We should be very polite to this environment for birds, but then potentially the bird can also move over this. And so we are working on that now. And another project is also in Seoul that also explains the changes that here. This is kind of very generic part of Seoul. If someone showed me a picture of that, I wouldn't recognize. There's apartments and anonymous towers and very dense. Yes, it looks like Seoul, but it could be Busan and other part of town. But then when you show it like that, I can totally name. This is Inwangsan, Bukhansan, Bogaksan, and then Pohyonbong, which is one of the tallest. So then through the trigonometry, I can sort of figure out this would be the area. Some even argues that Seoul doesn't need a landmark because we have these kind of alpine urban situation that is very unique, maybe comparable to Hong Kong or Sao Paulo. There are not many cities like that, of that scale of 10 million people. And then this area is a completely new area that is completely flat, used to be farmland, that is very close to domestic airport, Gimpo Airport. And this is R&D, LG, known for this flat screen and so on. They're moving in, they've become like a major tenant. And then recently, Isang's contribution, Morphosis project, this R&D center, a beautiful standout project is just completed. Recommend you to go and see it. And our site is actually same client as the Morphosis client, Kolon Group, which is initially started as a textile company, and they make sportswears and tents and outdoor things, and then now they're doing photovoltaics and all that. And this was actually also public and private sort of a collaboration that this is a Morphosis building, and then there's this kind of intersecting green band that was designated, and there's this square of 100 meter, maybe almost a square lot that is designated as a park, and the city government asked this company to kind of contribute to create a cultural building that will be handed over after their use of 30 years. So, and then so this competition brief was also we can design the whole park and so on. So this is how it looks like, which would be, again, very anonymous, but in this case, almost like a German style, like 10-story, because of the airplane above flying, and very unified sort of thing, except the Morphosis building. And this is a site. So idea was that when you create something, like maybe resembles maybe less of those what's the ubiquitous there, but more maybe like a mountain. So that's and idea was you create it's kind of obvious that people can cut through creating a shortcut in there. So this park will be in 4 little mounds, and our building will be the largest mound there, basically. And then and it's going to be a white concrete building, and will twist, the vertical becomes horizontal, and all the mound will create sort of a containment there, which will have sort of a cozy, sort of a more people feel like they can stay. So that's the first arc in plan, and then second arc is in section, and that would kind of allow people to go up and down. One side stair, and one side is the ramp, and that also creates the large 30-meter long, very shallow arch. Then that allows also the people to go up, that it becomes like a nice sort of a Spanish step type of a situation, overlooking the park, facing south. And then the third one is more or less like a very gentle diagonal, but nevertheless it has an arc. That is the shape of the building. It's mainly a contemporary art museum, and they initially asked for 3 spaces that varies in size and that also has a varying heights. So instead of giving them 3 separate spaces, we give them a one sloping surface that begins from 11 feet tall to 30 feet tall, which could of course be divided. So that these walls, and also slowly grow because of this sort of round shape edge there. So right now we just got the permission, and hopefully we'll start building later this year. And this could be blocked off, and we're showing the variations and so on. So this actually, they have actually this French artist, sort of surreal, they have this in their collection, and they have it in their lobby, and exactly same height, space actually, 30 feet. And then upper part, you go up, there's classrooms, and then you can also, the handicap access to the roof, which will be a public sort of a domain. And roof will have a nice stairs, and it could also use what's available from them, the tent. We're gonna probably have to design better. This is kind of generic, but we're working on that. We tend to like this Go game idea to explain what we do, meaning that the radical, probably you know this Go game, right? The AlphaGo beat this Korean genius, prodigy guy, a couple of years ago, but still, also, I mean, there's a Duchamp story. You probably know that he was so sick and tired of, by end up his career creating this kind of objects, and he was completely into this kind of pure joy of involved in the process. And that, I mean, if it's almost too much jump from what we do, but we do like the idea that our building itself by itself has actually no value by itself, but it's actually the constellation that creates actually the more, there's more charged sort of ideas, or like for example, we can kind of call these black stones as our own project that kind of create some kind of a area of interest, and then white part is this constantly changing world around us that kind of defines architecture, and it's actually almost like this endless game. And we, when you look at these the notation newspaper after these big games next day, these numbers are the chronology of that, and people with the experience that will know exactly these ups and downs and dramas could happen. So that kind of explains our kind of a chronology of these ideas, how we kind of start to call these numbers. And this idea kind of was explored in our own show that was year 2014. That was first 12 years our project. We call it Before After. Architects tend to talk about this whole beginning to end sort of masterful sketch, napkin sketch on an airplane ride. Then the Iwan Bans picture of this glorious completion of this happy moment. But for me, it's more interested as a sort of a serial before and after of different performances. And this was also, was our way to explore the post-occupancy sort of situations. And architecture, I think, plays a certain role in it. But also there are lots of disappointing, I mean, there are a lot of buildings that we have is already unrecognizable. I don't know if it's quite, I think it's quite different culture yet. And so I'll sort of skip. I think one of the things we did for the exhibition was also we kind of called out these pictograms that are the preoccupations of 21 most frequently explored ideas, and the first one was the frequency. The first one was a courtyard, which was like but then circle, and then matrix studies, time specific. These are not only nouns or verbs or their adjectives, their attitude. They explore very different things. That ends with a jackass architecture, which I'll probably have no time to explore, but it's almost like a hieroglyph, the Chinese letters that now about 100,000 of them, but we kind of developed these kind of almost like it just was an exploration of this sort of a check of our mapping of our where we were, and each sort of a category, how each project, the numbers. The red ones are, by the way, unbuilt or dead babies that we have. And one of the matrix story, the third most explored idea was about dealing with its density. As you know, Seoul has grown about 50 times its population last 100 years. And this, when the city used to be 100 years ago flat, this is 70s, I was kid. This was when we were so poor, the North Koreans, and then this is 87, I was 30, 87 is like what is 68 for you guys, Americans, Berkeley, all that. And yeah, still this is end of 80s, still you see this kind of small alleyways with small, and people, Koreans take off their shoes and that's when they become, any place becomes their living room, very comfortable and so on. and this was 1999. Until at this moment, I took this picture myself, we didn't really have any public space because of this political situation that, I went to school, college, they didn't have, our pedestrian paving was all asphalt. If it's blocked, it'll turn into rubble, and they will use it as a weapon against tear gas and so on. But then when we quickly become nouveau-riche, so many Hyundai cars, we have to double up the road, and then all of a sudden we get this nice Lina Bobardian covered spaces, and quickly sort of appropriated as this kind of a public space. Still, there's no public sector attempt to do that because they're so scared that if they create anything like a square, people will gather and do something. But then this 2002 World Cup with Korea, Japan co-hosting, somehow we went all the way to semi-final. Sorry, Spanish people. And it was as many as 7 million people on the street doing this Red Devils cheer. And I think that's when they realized also Koreans can gather massively with being completely ecstatic, euphoric, and so on. And then it also developed into this almost polytainment family sort of a thing. This is candlelight process, you heard about it. It was 14 times a couple of years ago, and that impeached the president. She got 24 years of sentence. One before also other two kleptocratic, is that the word, right? Kleptocracy? 2 presidents now in jail. I'm super happy. I was about to come back to America, by the way, last year. So I was really avoiding, try to move away from anything public because it was, they run like their business and private interests. So anyway, but this, I would rather work with the developers. And then density when it become, but for me, this matrix thing was about motivation was that, here in the West or, skyrise was developed and they kind of have become like a trophy and they make it special. But then you're talking about Hong Kong, Korea, you have this 60, 80 story generic cookie cutter apartment towers, anonymous. And the real problem is not the beautiful building or facade, all that is very important. I mean, I love to do nice looking buildings, but then I think the social issue is a bigger problem, how this get out of this chicken coop like social situation. It's rather Orwellian sort of a thing. And early on with it's still the largest tower we have done, 55,000 square meter, and this entire 27-story building has no repeating sort of numbers. I showed this last time, I think, 10 years ago, very early on. And it also has this kind of a sky gardens and so on. This was a very second year, 2004, we designed, completed around 2009. It's a tall building, but that has this kind of a human quality, almost feels like a New York tenement apartment backyard like a quality to it. And also we kind of, our building, still we like to have some special quality, but also almost like a prototyping that this idea can be proliferated and copied and so on. So this missing matrix idea also kind of spawned the eroded one, much cheaper. It's a simple office building. And then this one is bundle matrix, simple bundle structure idea. it's the tallest one we've done, 36 stories. Core in the middle, but then we kind of opened up, so we call it a social bridge. As you know, in this sort of developer world, architect's ability is measured by the minimizing the common area to create the the maximum sellable area. So we always have to fight and create an excuse to create like balcony nice, and you can go out and smoke, and you can plant trees, and they don't really care, but somehow we managed to do that. And then this bundle matrix become a stocky bundle matrix. That's after post-bubble 2008, when the developer looking into a much smaller unit, kind of cruel, like very tiny unit for these young urbanites. They have these fancy names nowadays, right? This kind of hotel-like situation, but it was also we used that sort of situation, but to create a more common space there. It's simple 10-story, but it has 99 units in it. But it's the tall one, the slender bundle, and this is stocky bundle. You can see the similar qualities of both projects, and this turned out to be a very good for them because they didn't sell completely as they wished to, and then they had to go on as a sort of a rental business. But then a lot of corporations took it as like a chunks of 15 units, 10 units, because of this common area, and they kind of get to use and appropriate it. So, and then this is a dormitory that we completed, and this was 5 years ago we started, and this was very different because the other projects that I had to fight for it wasn't something that we were asked for. But then this university had this noble, almost believe more than most architects that I know that somehow architecture will make this cultivate young students most part of civilized society and so on. So I worked with the architect who was first city architect, who very likely become the state architect, very well respected figure. My generation above, Seung-Yo Sang and us, each one were asked to do 600 students. And it was had a master plan, and this, as in most Korea, which has a 70% of areas occupied with mountainous terrain, this campus is at the mid-level of mountain, and it slopes down about 27 meters, so about 8 stories down. So it's quite a challenging site. And we've done completely the opposite. Somehow we both pitch as a very complementary sort of a project. And our idea was this polarization, typical dormitory situation where you have your almost anarchic, messy room versus the nobody cares outside. But instead, you get this different scale of common, shared, semi-private, semi-public area. And they already had 3 dormitories, so they had a very specific certain area, almost 30 square meter for 2 students' room. That would be the most common thing. And then we said, we divide, then you end up getting just corridors, and that would be boring. And then we kind of come up with the idea that if you do double-decker, then the one bed size area that you save becomes outside area, so then becomes series of pockets that you can be appropriated. So then they say, students don't really like to sleep on the upper level. It's like bad IKEA furniture and so on. So I said, we'll make a much larger, a taller space, like a mini loft. And then each bed also has a small windows that can ventilate, and they have their own thing. And then the corner window will allow also both ends has their own little windows, and then students can interact or not interact, turn their back each other, and so on. They accepted it. So then this is quite a cheap project, very sort of average budget. So 5.4 meter square planar concrete wall RC structure is we applied with these spaces in between. And then we have to apply to this challenging site. And as I said, the campus is on the mid-level of the mountain with cherry blossom. This is just what's happening right now, although this was taken many years ago. And then somewhere between the campus level to the bottom, eastern edge of the campus, there's another access road that we have to maintain. So this is the access road in the middle campus. There's a cherry blossom. We tried the courtyard here, didn't fit. And then we realized we only had to do this kind of a skewed parallelogram. And that follows the grain of the topography, but also save the trees, and then so on. And then we kind of apply this square module there, so it becomes this kind of a pixelated parallelogram. So kind of it developed like that. Of course, it wasn't as easy. We went through like almost few hundred variations of this but we literally really started with a very small space, and we did 3-tower version, 2-tower version, and we actually, for this plateau exhibition there was a sketch section because we show every process of architecture, and this had like 2,000 sketches that I did over SketchUps and a lot of whiteouts, and then literally become like an animation of sort of a messy drawings. So this is more recent. Last week, cherry blossom happened, so we took the picture there. Interestingly, this 10-story building, typically you have this dormitory, a 10-story, first 2 floors are the common areas, and above you have to take the elevator up, go down. But in this case, because of the slope, you have bottom 4 floors are the boys, and then top 4 floors are the girls. They have better views and so on. And then in the middle, 5th and 6th floors are the common area. So you can actually, it's almost like a bridge. I try also like co-ed every floor, but Korea a little bit still Confucius and so on. So yeah. I mean, also we try a new project. We're doing like a gender-neutral toilets and things like that. It's not simplifies, but so from the campus level, level down is a big canteen, and then other level down is what we call student hub, and then this other sleeping living area below. So when you look at it from the east side, it's kind of quite rigorous with this large space, different scales. The largest one on 6th, and then 5th floor is this hub, and then the small ones. But then when you look at it 3-dimensionally, it's something else. And this boys zone, we want to create, each floor has this kind of a common terrace, so we kind of had this drawer-like operation. And one of the, every floor of course changes, but one of the typical floor here is that, I mean, there's no typical floor, but one floor here, because of this parallelogram, you have this straight corridor with these pockets, and then this pixelated diagonal becomes sort of interesting to kind of alleyway situation, this kind of a zigzaggy situation. So you have these two. And then another thing we apply, very Korean thing, is that as soon as you get out of the elevator, you take up your own shoes. There's a locker there, switch to slippers, so that actually the corridor becomes a living room and they feel at home. It's like walking into 100 students living together apartments. So there's basically these two corridors that gets lights, and so these are some of the images. This was last week. They still don't know what to do with this abandoned space. So, but it was just rained. So, and then these pockets. Sometimes we create a double space. Maybe they can use for rock climbing exercise, and it kind of gives a various. I think that's kind of, I don't know, I'm very curious because for me that's the most fun part, that really watch and how this space is used. Of course, they don't know exactly where to put their laundries, because I hope that it's to put it in the sunny part, like the southern side of pockets, but they tend to put it in front of their own room. I mean, as if someone's going to steal it. I think that's kind of the level that architecture has a limit. I think it also has a good sort of a, says as a working community, people trust each other and so on. So they just moved in a month ago, because Korea, the academic year starts at early March. So there you go. I think, I have more things to show you, but, and okay, this goes on a little bit because there's structurally exciting part that, we had this almost archaic sort of solid little village-like sleeping area, but then we want to create very open space for this larger community. Student hub, that is only exception that actually complete the loop with the terrace facing east. This was an exhibition image 3 years ago at Plateau. This was fun, actually. We get to show all those, almost every project that we like on the same scale, 1 to 50 on a wall, section and wall. I tell you, it will be very helpful for if you're practicing architect to compare in scale. So, so that's the terrace at the student hub level, and some of those moments from female dormitory, you get this sort of a dramatic moment. The challenge was that we had to cross this existing access road. So then we applied these 4 large trusses that suspends the floor, or 5th floor. And then that was during the construction. So these are the 20 centimeter diameter suspended. Now they moved in with convenience stores and coffee shops and so on. So, and then the 6th floor, that would be the largest, which is 350 people seat simultaneously. You can dine together. That would be also another almost 100 feet long, 3 trusses. That makes it quite generous. Campus level with cherry blossom, and then 1 level below is this is the large space before they move in. And then these are what's happening last week. And then at the campus level, it almost had this kind of look, sort of a deceptively symmetric, but it's not. But it shows our idea of stepping in section and stepping in plan. I think it's kind of and which kind of contrasts with almost randomness of boys' part somehow. We were so tidy up there for a girls' part because we didn't have to create this drawer or thing to create this collective terraces because of this stepping business. So we try a different look almost. So that's from the campus. I think for me, it was quite exciting that it was, we didn't start out as a form and then we didn't know where we're going, but then it was all about this optimizing also together with the other architect that I respect and creating, like it was once 5-story from the campus and then we wanted to lower and then also, yeah, it was really explore. I mean, it was very small. We start from the bedroom and then somehow we got there. So, I think, I have kind of gone overboard with it. I mean, these are some of those more recent other type of explorations of using very specific forms of structure, how that could be a system. This was kind of our against for domino that we've been exploring through this, in Asian, this developer, with the developer especially, because we have to maximize it. So everything has to be like this flat, minimum height with stacked up, really suffocating situation. But then we kind of went outwards to non-urban areas, and this is headquarters, what is kind of like the Facebook of Korea, that we kind of were able to explore this kind of form with a special quality, that there are 5 forms that could be combined and generate various spaces. So that's kind of we had this, I think it was a Phipps obsession or something, from domino to dome, and then there's another sister. This one is very different. It's not this sort of process driven, but more like a complete project. But nevertheless, it has non-flat. It's a clubhouse it's a high-end resort. It's probably the most expensive per square meter we have spent, and I don't feel that guilty about that actually. Once in a while, And then this one we call it domino, and the idea was very simple. It was again what Doris was telling me. This hipster area was literally across the street from my office. We come up with a very simple plan for this rental office that is 16.5 meter in square, and then all the elevators and services are in the back, so it's very clear. So the columnless, but it's 16.5 meters, is quite long to create a one-span concrete building. So we shifted the columns, so become 13 meters square. And then you get this, each corner has this kind of a 3-meter cantilever. And then those beams are upturned beams. And then we realized with our mechanical engineer that we can carve the center because this plenum air can only run on the edges, so that you actually get this simple section. So you end up getting a sort of shallow dome, we call it. So that's what it is. In a way, this current project that also deals with a specific form, this is not systemic, but, its own unique thing. But I think I don't want to go on too overboard, but I think I'll show you something that we recently have won another invited competition. Can you help me with this? I'm Apple idiot, maybe. Doris, thank you so much. Yeah, I just explained this project. It's actually, again, another city project. It's very noble intention, which is the Cinematheque. That is, as you probably heard of, Korean cinema has been burgeoning for the last 20 years or so. Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho doing Netflix, BBC now, miniseries. Anyway, I think it's a kind of dangerous moment now that is so much sort of growth as an industry, but then this exciting moment of this new expression is kind of slowly shrinking. So city actually decided to create a sort of a cinematheque of 3 cinemas, but in a very historic site where all the Korean Hollywood began, which is Chungmuro. And then and they invited Japanese again, Korean, American architects, and we just a month ago we won this competition. And we had fun with it. It was our office first time we made a video presentation. So I was actually in the video presentation, subtitles for the foreign jury, and then I was kind of reading a Korean through it. So I think that was kind of a very successful. People said I communicated quite clearly on both sides. And it's a simple story, but I talk about my New York days and then how important that is. It's like a little love letter. And then, but it will go on for like 15 minutes. So you guys are very good at multitasking, so I don't want to take up too much time. And please start the Q&A now. So thank you very much.
Questions?
Please.
Spoke about some of the negative sort of aspects that develop in post-clustered occupancy, but there were some moments that you alluded in your presentation to sort of the interesting things that can happen with sort of people having these sort of unexpected uses. Sort of
Absolutely.
spaces.
Sometimes better than I hoped for.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could elaborate
Yes,
about
the beautiful mutation, sabotage, very much. I mean, when you're in, I think I often use my friend Sam Jacobs' quote that architecture is about 1% inspiration and 99% compromise. And I think it's really that we had this moment of ecstasy at the very beginning, which should be damn good because the rest will be just bringing that down to the real world. And then once it's done and you only see what shouldn't be there, what's not there, and then it goes on, actually. And I do like it. I mean, for me, architecture, I mean, also especially in my region, is quite different. Architecture is so part of the construction industry and Ministry of Construction, and, you know, it's much more macho and less about this sophisticated this cultural thing. Although there's this opposite thing is happening, which is I'm like, whoa, you know, it's like, sometimes I also like these posh, very delicate clients, and I also like to work with them. But mostly I'm working with the bureaucrats and construction company as a clients and things like that. So these things bound to happen, you know. And I don't know, I mean, we're just happy to explore various facets of it. So.
Well, I was curious if there were any really exciting examples of some of the other things that happened in use that you thought was really cool.
Recently, someone put a really giant 10-feet dog there, and I thought that was something. But what would be? I mean, this umbrella was something that I didn't expect for the dormitory because I was really expecting, you know, for the last 5 years, you know, students start to gather a group and they, you know, probably it will happen. It probably takes a practice also. But recently, also one of this post-occupancy project, we did this social bridge. There's a different project that I did show you. We went through each those bridge areas, and it was fascinating that they were actually really actively using it as some turned into almost like a bird cage, sort of like an indoor zoo of like 20 cages and then some turn into really. I mean, it was. Something that didn't really imagine in our wildest dreams. So I mean, this happened. Okay, I can tell you the worst thing. That there's a Dalgi theme park, which was somehow our early practice was known. That was then we're still working with James Slade back in New York when the firm that I started after between OMA and Mass Studies. This was a children's theme park, and it was very popular for a long time. Features like a single building as a theme park, so very successful. But then somehow over the 10 years or so after it was completed, because of this industry that supported this small fun space that is a fashion, it was completely taken over by, you know, those H&M, Zara, this globalized other type of fast fashion. So it killed a lot of Korean fashion brands. So then this client become completely skeptical about this whole fashion, and then he kind of sold the fashion. He had to because bankrupt, and then he started getting into farming. So when we are actually preparing this exhibition, that sort of this landscape project we first did, that was actually featured in the Court Foster Venice Biennale 2004, and that turned into like a real organic fertilizers and like chickens and really become the wild nature. And that was a bit tragic, but then also, I don't know, it was just interesting. Yeah. But I was very happy that he kind of kept the building and somehow he was continuing to do something with it. So that's... Okay, so this kind of goes on. You don't have to listen to me. I can have a choice. Back and forth. Any questions? Thank you. Please.
You were in charge of the Korea Pavilion for the Venice Biennale in 2014.
Yes. This is the part that I skipped because too much me.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think that's a good question because right now we are in a very exciting moment, and this was very unusual time. I had to kind of present something as an invited potential commissioner and curator. And I can tell you quickly, last 20 years, first 10 years of the last 20 years was the Sunshine Policy. This is when the Nobel Peace Prize won president went to North Korea first time, and then the next one went there. Third one might about to happen right in 20 days, 18 days, but and then last 10 years until last year with this current president, this was turning the clock backwards, right? Completely back in the 60s and 70s. Again, two are in jail, very happy about that. But we were right in the middle of those second half of this, 5 years ago exactly. So I was doing, I see this TV of these Korean K-pop stars standing next to Kim Jong-un. Looks like this photoshopped image, like as a joke or something. But then unbelievable, unreal things happen. But this, when I was asked to do it, I'm really not that political person. I work with the rich people and powerful people, but tend to ones that I like. But this that time was unavoidable because of the REM's, my old boss's sort of mandate that was looking back 100 years, and Korea was one country, although it was a Japanese colony. And if it was maybe 72 years, maybe I'll just have to present something, this theme that he had, absorbing modernity from 1914 until 2014, right? So it was obvious to me, although I had no clue as much as you about the North Korea, never been able to go. You guys can go, right? No, America not anymore, right? Since last year, but you used to be able to. So it was actually sort of quite interesting experience, and for me, more than anything, the direct collaboration didn't happen because of the larger the power dynamics at the time. Yet we are able to bring in so many people, as many as 37 contributors from 14 different nationalities, who a lot of them never met, but their interest was about cities, and they're historians, filmmakers, and photographers, both someone who's both interested in both Koreas or South or North, but somehow I was able to invite most of them who were part of the show. So actually it spawned interesting sort of camaraderie moment, and then kind of continue different part of the world, symposiums and gatherings, and also getting, we've been doing that. So I'm quite happy that I was able to sort of, there were other really pioneering figures that I admire, but it was a very strange moment that happened. Yeah. So, and we are now doing something with the ZMZ. I'll show you this one image, but it's about, together with actually quite respected artists, Shigeru Ban is part of it, and Olaf Eliasson and a few artists and architects, Mumbai Studios, one of them. We've been also working on it before this situation, last 3 or 2 years, as almost like a statement to, because we know that this territory is understood as a geopolitical power dynamism, but it will soon maybe become the market sort of logic also. There are already South Korean money investing, buying lands along that area already. They're fast. So we're actually trying to keep that as a sort of a nature, as another sort of a uniting sort of a the valuable thing that with the culture also. So actually there was a LA Times article about that end of last year. I don't know if you know Alan Weisman. He wrote the book called World Without Us. he imagined like how the world's gonna be if some people die one day all of a sudden altogether. How long it takes to recover certain things, and it goes on like billion years. But he visited like Chernobyl and DMZ already a few times. But he came to Korea, really supported us, and wrote an article about that, quite detailed one. If you want to get to that, yeah. Anyway, so that's maybe unnecessarily long answer, but please, please.
So I feel like if you stayed in America more into, like you said you want to go to America, but what motivated you to go back to Korea?
It was actually, I was quite determined not to go back. But then, where James and I, when we had a practice, we had a very frustrated doing, fantastic life there and all that. I love New York, but then, again, we're given choices were very, we took our job seriously and loft renovations and gallery reception desks, and it was like, goes on like that. And then when this small pixel house thing came in, okay, let's do something finally ground up. And I thought I would come back, but then Korea became quite different country. It was 13 years after I was away. And I left, it was very horrible regime, the military regime. And that's why I was so determined not to go back. But then it was actually that World Cup moment, that 2002. Mass studies started 2003. So, and it was also, for me, it wasn't like this nostalgic thing, that homecoming, but it was completely different, almost country it felt like. So it became an interesting challenge for me. So I think I had a harder time to adjust back to my own country than when I was young and moved to New York, actually. Maybe I was more flexible, resilient, but so. Any other? Please. Sold? Interesting. No, we're not that rich. However, we are having very exciting moment building our own office now. Again, that was very accidental because it has to do with this film industry that I'm tied with. Somehow started with a developer, and then developer will be me and this director friend of mine, independent film. He wanted to have a house designed by us, and then we were helping him to look for land. And then, as it turned out, good land, he has to go up high so he can get the mountain view, and then somebody has to hold this fourth level to get a view that also maximize, quite expensive. So then, hey, maybe we can at least get to use the building we designed, maybe not owning it, but then it went completely over budget, so we kind of had to loan, and so we were working on something, and then another actress came in, and it's like we're doing a co-op thing basically. So maybe next summer you come, you can visit. One nice thing we have is we have a company canteen. We've been always keeping, except the very beginning, we went off 40 people about 2 years because of this tower, missing matrix tower, and then I didn't like it, so I kind of whoa, and now about 25 people almost constantly. So we also take the job that much, and so but nice thing is we have like a nice Korean kitchen. So the mom and aunts of one of my employee comes, and they can make bad food. It's like really so that's okay. So thank you for being very attentive and focused. Thank you.